So just as people are coming in, I have popped a link in the chat. It would be great if people could just jump on. It's just a Google Doc so that we know who's joined us today, and also a spot for you to pop any questions that you have. Hopefully we'll get to your questions today, but if we don't, it's just a way for us to get back in contact with you and try and respond to any questions that we haven't managed to get to for you today. So a couple of people asking me to repost the link, so I'll do that now. It's great to see so many people joining us. We have a panel of people here who've done the IBPLC work. And it's always a little bit daunting when you're doing these kinds of online conferences and you have a panel which involves 5 people and you're never quite sure whether or not the panel is going to outnumber the audience. So, but I think we're looking good so far. So the links to this slide are also there. And I know we have Amy joining us from LA, and we also have guests from Utah. So once you have used the link to let us know that you're here and let us know what questions you might have, it would be great if you could just pop in the chat where you're joining us from. So I'm joining you from Tasmania in Australia this morning. Other members of our panel are from Morisset High School, which is Newcastle in New South Wales. One of my other co-panelists, Gaby Logan, is joining us from Barbados, where she runs Beyond the Box, this big picture school there, and also my colleague Andrea Purcell from LA. So we've got Illinois there, Texas, Pennsylvania, Wyoming, New York. Wow, all sides, and Massachusetts. So all 4 corners of the US and a bit of the middle too. That's awesome. So it's a little after 4:15 in the morning here in Australia. So I'm going to jump in and get started. So the first thing that I would like to do is acknowledge that I'm coming from La Truida, Tasmania, which is the home of the Palawa people, First Nation people here in Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and also First Nations people from around the world where you are all joining us from at the moment. It is early here, Jennifer, but we believe in this work and we thought it was worth getting up for. So I am going to just give you a brief outline of how things are going to work today. I'm going to introduce the credential. I have a slideshow. The link to the slideshow is in the chat, along with the link to sign in. I'm just going to pop the sign in link back in there again. Place for you to pop any questions that you have. I'll share with you a slideshow, and which includes a video, which will just give you some insights into the IBPLC and the work that we have been doing in that space. Then I'm joined on a panel by 2 students who have participated in the IBPLC. So Brandon is a graduate from last year. He graduated in December of last year. Savannah is just putting the finishing touches on all of her work. So she's a graduate from this year. She's also joined by Jacqui White, who wears lots of hats. In addition to being Savannah's mother, she's an advisory teacher and the head teacher at Morisset High School. And is also a big picture school coach here in Australia. We have Gaby Logan, who is being very intrepid today. She's joining us from her car as she's out on a whole school learning through internship activity with the young people from her school at Beyond the Box Education in Barbados. And also my colleague, Andrea Purcell, who is also a big picture design coach and works with big picture learning in the US and has been leading out on this work in the United States. So once I've shared with you the slides and the video, there'll be an opportunity for everybody in the panel to share with you a little bit about their experience with the IBPLC. And then we will move into a Q&A where you're welcome to ask questions of anybody on the panel. So really, to tell the story of the International Big Picture Learning Credential, we have to take a few steps back and recognise that this work is actually built out of the Big Picture Design for Learning. And the Big Picture Design for Learning started in the US. So Elliot Washer and Dennis Litke did the early work on building a design that was student-centered, that focuses on the student interests and allows students to learn both in and out of the building. And not only did they start that work, but they are still strong drivers of that work in the US and internationally. So they've been doing that work for many years now. In 2006, Viv White and John Hogan, the co-founders of Big Picture Australia, had been travelling in the US as a part of a coalition of schools looking at new and innovative designs for learning. They came across the Big Picture design, were so impressed with it that basically they brought it back to Australia and moved away from the coalition and focused their energies on building the Big Picture network in Australia. And there's over 40 schools currently in Australia, and we're getting more it seems like almost on a weekly basis at the moment, and there's many hundreds of campuses worldwide. So the big picture design for learning really is focused around that idea of passion. So students having a personalized learning journey that's focused around their interest. They learn about their interests through projects that they do in school, but they also work with mentors outside of school, including in workplaces. So in big picture, we're encouraging students to be out of the school at least 2 days a week, certainly by the time that they are in the senior years of school. And another significant difference, I guess, in the big picture design is the way that students collect evidence of their learning and share that each term in an exhibition. So they have a portfolio of work and they share that with a panel of their peers, advisory teachers, mentors, and family. So it's a really authentic way for them to share their learning. So coming out of that design, that interest-based design, we have developed the International Big Picture Learning Credential as a way of recognising the new learning that happens as a result of the big picture design. So it's new learning for new assessment for new learning. Big picture design really, we think about the impact on the what we describe as the 4 grammars of schooling. So I've already mentioned that it's interest-based. It's in terms of pedagogy, it's really student-driven. So students work with their advisory teacher to develop their own learning plan. We don't have siloed subjects, as you might see in a more traditional or conventional schooling model. And they work with one teacher over time. So that could be for a period of 2 to 4 years or even longer in some cases, while they focus on that learning in and out of the building. In big picture, we talk about the pillars of the work being the student interest, the opportunity for them to practice those interests both in and out of the school, and also relationships are a very key part of the big picture design. And they're a significant reason why we've been able to be so successful in terms of the credential and really privileging teacher judgment as a mechanism for recognising what our young people can say, make, do and value. Those relationships are with mentors out of the building, but also with that key adult within the building who's their advisory teacher. So advisory teachers and mentors get to know our young people and they know them well, and that allows them to make strong and informed judgments about the young people and their work. So I'm just going to share a video with you now. It runs for about 8 minutes. It'll cover off on some of the things that I've already said, but also give you some additional insights into the process.
Hello, I'd like to introduce you to the International Big Picture Learning Credential, or the IBPLC for short. It is a personalized and innovative final year assessment that can help all students graduate to a range of pathways like work, trade, college, or university. What's so different about it? It is a new way of structuring schools, and it is a new measure of assessing what students know, can do, and value.
I'm a senior big picture student with a strong passion for football and all things around exercise science.
My main goal as a software developer is just to create applications that help benefit other people and make other people's lives easier.
What I'm good at is problem solving. With computers, I had this natural ability to look, analyze and assess what's happening with the components. Big Picture has allowed me to explore the world of IT at such a young age.
I'm extremely passionate about environmental science and conservation, especially that involving seaweed forests. I did my own independent research on the question, how will climate change affect the Great Southern Reef's seaweed forest ecosystems?
The IBPLC is an innovation of our Australian colleagues in the Big Picture Learning Network. Frustrated by the way standardized assessment regimes were getting in the way of young people reaching their true potential, they have designed a whole new personalized credential that allows young people to choose what, how, where, and who they learn with. Credits everything a learner chooses to do, both inside and outside of school, is an accurate portrait of their distinctive abilities and qualities, harnesses teacher professional judgment, uses a psychometrically evaluated tool, carries the warrant of the highly respected University of Melbourne, and generates a user-friendly digital transcript that young people can take wherever they go. What's more, the IBPLC is already accepted by over 40% of universities and numerous training colleges around Australia. The Credential is now rolling out in the United States and offers a unique opportunity for educators to get on board and credit young people for their diverse achievements in a personal yet rigorous way. The digital transcript of the IBPLC is special. It allows the full person behind the assessment to shine through. Let's meet Jarif. On the left, you can read a short statement about who he is as a learner. Click on his video profile and you can meet him in person.
I am now aiming to work towards a career in either defense, intelligence, or security.
Click on his online portfolio to explore evidence of his best work. Now let's turn to his assessment results. On the right, you'll see a flower graph that certifies his accomplishments. Each colored petal represents one of the 6 learning goals. These boxes describe what Jarif can do at the level he has reached between 1 to 5. Down here, you'll see the warrant badge from the University of Melbourne. So what is the Big Picture Learning Design? It's all about students learning through their passions and interests, both inside and outside of school. Students don't have subjects, schedules, multiple teachers, or exams. Instead, students are in control of their own curriculum. They develop personal learning plans that are connected to 6 rigorous learning goals. They learn on internships with adult mentors in the community, and every term they exhibit their learning to a panel of teachers, peers, family, and mentors. I love the idea of students doing internships while still at school. They get to explore their interests, learn some relevant skills, and build their networks. The beauty of young people exhibiting their learning, rather than taking a standardized test, is that they get to show their strengths and their depth of knowledge without all the test anxiety. That is much more meaningful than a test score from one day. So what are the implications of this for the final year assessment?
Well, the universities tell us that the single mark score, wherever it is across the world, doesn't help them understand who their students will be. They also have, in many of our universities, up to 50% dropout of young people who come to university for the first year. So they're looking at new ways of finding out who their students are so they can actually guarantee a better outcome for themselves. So there's a win-win.
The tests that we typically have had are the admissions requirements look at literacy and numeracy, but not other stuff, particularly persistence and the ability to go for a goal and achieve it. So other alternative measures which actually show evidence that you've done something, not just you've gotten a test score, are perhaps more authentic.
On my website, you will find my student statement, my senior project evidence, my work as school captain, evidence of my big picture promotional work, my narratives, post-school plan, evidence from my school-based traineeship, and my TAFE work.
These days, when students are preparing themselves for a job or college, it's really helpful that they've already built up their portfolios and student profiles. So what's the innovative assessment process behind this new credential? The 6 big picture learning goals are a set of aspirations for all learners that lend depth and rigor to everything they do and inform all assessment for their end of school credential. Each learning goal is underpinned by an assessment frame that describes behaviors that can be performed by learners at 5 levels known as progressions. Advisory teachers draw upon numerous sources of evidence found in key pieces of work and in real-world learning with mentors on internships. Observations of students' interactions with a range of adults and peers, and reflecting on their learning journey are also valued sources of evidence. Teachers meet regularly with colleagues to moderate their judgments both in school and across the network.
After school, I plan on completing a TAFE diploma in information technology and continue working part-time in computer retail. After that, who knows what the future has in store for me.
My goals are for the future is to go to the University of Newcastle to study biomedical science. My goals for soccer is to make the Australian Young Matildas team in 2022, as well as receiving a W League contract.
I would want to become a machine learning engineer or a data scientist, working in small startups or a big company like Google.
In the future, we want to see kelp forests that look flourishing and healthy with fish and seals swimming through them, rather than something like this.
If you'd like to join the international network implementing the IBPLC, join here.
Okay, so that gives you quite an oversight and probably explains it more eloquently than I can. So I do have some more slides that I'm just going to kind of skim through here, but I think as always when we do this work, it's the stories from people who are actually doing the work that add our richness and help us to understand it in new and innovative ways. So I'm going to flick through a few slides, then go to the panel, and then you all have the slideshow, so we can certainly come back to anything on there if you have particular questions. I would just like to share this screen about the work so far in terms of IBPLC graduates in Australia. We're really proud of the work that we've done. It is a credential for young people moving into any pathway that they choose at the end of school. So we have our young people heading off into the workforce, and you can see that 83% of the students that we surveyed in the destination survey noted that their post-school destination was linked to their interest and work that they had done while they were in a big picture school. And in particular, we're noticing that the relational piece of the big picture design is really important. It's exposing our young people to work and also allowing them to build a network and a meshwork of people who can help them in their to meet their post-school goals. And I can say that so far, so in 2021, we had 100% of our students who applied to universities received offers at the university, their first university of choice. We don't have the final numbers for 2022 at the moment, but we are on track to maintain that record at the moment. Internationally, we're now working with over 44 schools and 800 students. So we had 44 students in the US participate in the first round of the IBPLC pilot last year. And this year in the US, we have up to 150 students who are piloting the IBPLC, and Andrea would be able to talk more about that later. We've already covered the difference through the video, but I think part of this story is is why. Why did we start this work? We were noticing that young people in Australia, particularly our young people in big picture schools, they were working really hard. They were often having to do additional courses and subjects to meet the requirements of the various states. But we wanted to show that they were more than just a score, and we wanted to really get the recognition for them for the work, the rich, deep knowledge that they had around their area of interest, and try and find a way, a mechanism for them not to have to do twice as much as everybody else by meeting state requirements as well as using the big picture design. This is an example of an actual credential. So if you're going back through the slideshow, there are live links in here to Aman's online portfolio and also video statement. And I'm going to circle back around to that later in our presentation. But for now, I'd like to move around our panel and give each person on our panel a chance to talk a little bit about their experience with the IBPLC. So I'm going to start with you, Brandon. So Brandon's a graduate from last year. So Brandon, if you just would like to let people know who you are and tell us a little bit about how you found the process of building your portfolio and doing the work as part of the IBPLC.
Thank you. So, yep, as Tanya said, I'm one of the Morisset High School graduates from last year. I graduated in December. So I've only recently gone through the process. I was the second year of cohort that went through from Morisset. So still pretty early on in the process, but I did really enjoy it to begin with. So just to evaluate on a bit more from what I did to go through the process to begin with, my senior thesis project, which is the overarching project that we do for the last 12 months of our schooling in big picture to actually graduate. My senior thesis project was centered around firefighter mental health, specifically focused on one of the firefighting agencies that's very prominent in New South Wales here in Australia, which is the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, of which I'm actually a volunteer member as well. So that's what kind of pushed me towards doing my senior thesis project around that. So in order to take that project that I was doing during 2021 and push that towards being able to be assessed and being able to be a quality project that allows me to graduate in high standing, I really worked closely with Jacqui, who is my advisor, who's also on the panel. I worked closely with her throughout the year in order to change things about my project and really work all of the learning goals into my project. So when it came time to do that assessment against the assessment frames that you saw on that video, it was really at the highest level that it could be. So it's a lot of back and forth work with your advisor and with your mentors. So of course I have, when I was doing my work, I had a various amount of mentors and different people I was working with at the time to be able to critique my work and make sure it was at its highest quality it could be, and build my portfolio up with evidence that I could present. Of course, I can create as much work as I want, but I also have to be able to evidence what I've done. So it's sufficient. So when Jacqui needs to assess what I've done, it's not just the end product, it's how I got there and all of the work that I've done in the meantime, which includes my LTIs, my outside of school work. So another big factor that pushed up a lot of credit in my transcript and my IBPLC was all of my outside volunteering. So I got a lot of experience from my 2.5 years of previous RFS service. And that's where I was getting a lot of my information from. That combined with the fact that I was doing an LTI with a clinical psychologist that was allowing me to get a lot of the information for the research side base of my work. That all evidenced got me quite high up on the assessment frames. So that's just a little bit of an insight on how that process all works. From there, when it was coming to the end of the year, of course, I get assessed term by term at each exhibition, depending on where my work's at, and then I get feedback from Jacqui, depending on if I'm reaching where I should be, or if I'm need to do a bit more work to get up to where Jacqui thinks I should be, depending on a lot of my past work. So like I said, it's really just working with your advisors and the people that you're working close with to try to get as much progress through the IBPLC process as possible. So it's a really intuitive process, I believe, that requires a lot of work, but it really pays off in the end, because I know post school I've used the transcript itself a fair amount of times, and I still do believe it really shows off a lot of a deeper view into what work I've actually done and how I'm evidenced more as a learner and a worker, and just basis things like that.
That's great. Thanks, Brandon. And after we've heard from other members of the panel, we'll see if anybody has any questions for you. I'm going to jump now to Gaby. Gaby Logan is out and about. So we talk about the international big picture at Credential, really recognising work that students do in and out of the school. And so an unintentional excursion that Gaby's a part of today is really highlighting that for us. But I'd love for Gaby to talk to you about Zed, who's a young person that at her school who she started this pilot work with.
Yes. Hi, everybody. How are you? So in True Leaving to Learn, you are actually indeed on a Leaving to Learn with me and all of my students, my senior department. We have basically just started running the IBPLC in the past 2 years in Barbados. The inspiration for it was that I had met Viv and I was feeling a lot of frustrations because we have a similar school system to Australia, which is a very test-driven school system. And I had a few students, specifically over COVID, but just in general, who were struggling to graduate, but who I knew regardless would be successful in life. They just weren't getting that piece of paper. And so I shared my frustrations with Elliot, and he said, you know what? Which is one of the founders of Big Picture. He said, you need to talk to Viv. She's got this new thing. I don't know if she's ready to roll it out yet, but talk to her. So I got on a call and she said, okay, we're going to let you try it. And so we jumped right in. I was really fortunate that my first student, my first IBPLC graduate, his mom was very supportive of what we were doing. And she said, you know what, even if at the end of the day, this is not his university pathway that he's on right now, even if it's not perfect, at least he gained really great knowledge and he has learned something. To be more specific, Zed actually did his senior project in trading, investing in the stock market, coming up with his own trading portfolio, speaking with mentors. And so, yes, he learned a lot of valuable life skills, but he went through a university application journey with me that was like no other. We had him apply in Barbados for the University of West Indies, which is the Caribbean university. And he got in, which is amazing. He applied with one of our other senior teachers to go to the US. Got into a school there in Florida. I'm apologizing right now. She has gone back to the US this school year, so it's the one school I cannot remember the name of right now. But then in a very, I guess, hectic world, him and his mom decided that they wanted to go across the pond, so he also applied to the Netherlands. And he got into the Hague International School of Business there. And most recently, last week, they sprung it on me. They wanted to go to Rome. And so we applied for John Cabot American University in Rome, and he got in. I will say that this sounds amazing, and I'm listing off these universities that he gained access to, but it was a process. All of them told us no to begin with. It was a fight. I will be very real and tell everyone that, but it was a fight that we were happy to have, and that we were, I guess, game for. We really pulled out all the stops. Tanya can tell you this. It was a lot of back and forth of getting letters from the University of Melbourne explaining the equivalency for us and for them, And each university required a phone call from me or several phone calls sometimes, a lot of data, a lot of backup. But in the end, speaking to Zed and seeing his work is really what swung that. And I think that understanding big picture and understanding the IBPLC, for me, that is probably, I guess, the best part of this story is it really warranted the work that we were doing. And it proved that really it is about the student and their work at the end of the day. And so I will say that to us, that's really what drove it home, and I think gained him the access into university. So I've talked a lot. I am going to head back into my car because I do have some students that are staring at me right now, but I will be here to answer questions. So feel free to throw them my way. I'm just going to turn back off my video again. So Tanya, if you need me, just feel free to call on me.
Thanks so much, Gaby. Going to jump across to Jacqui and Savannah. So happy for you two to decide between you who's going to speak first.
Thanks, Tanya. Hello, everyone. So just a little bit about this story at Morisset High School, where I'm based, Savannah is, and Brandon was. So we've been running the IBPLC over the past 3 years, part of the pilot program of developing the work there and making improvements as we go along and unroll it. And that's been like a wonderful experience. And the advisors have really enjoyed the process. So have the students. So have the leaders in the school. It's been highly successful. And our connections with the universities, they've always been really supportive and positive to us. We've just sort of been through that process in the last 2 weeks this year. So that's been a great opportunity. And we've had a lot of success with those students that aren't on a university pathway that have gone into employment, TAFE, just entrepreneurship. Some of them are still working it out, but they've used the IBPLC for those purposes as well. So it really is a design that suits every student. I haven't met a student that it hasn't worked with. So I think that needs to be sort of stated. So from my perspective as an advisor, working with the students on that day-to-day level, so behind the learning goals that were presented in the video that you saw is an assessment frame. And we look at that assessment frame and we identify where the students are sitting on that frame. And then from there, we move towards the flower graph, which is great. But if you were to speak to the students directly, and I'm sure you'll ask some questions, that isn't the driving force at all in this work. The driving force in this work is the students and their passions, their projects that they do, and the learning that they do around that. The connection to their learning through internships, so their work out of the school, and their connection to their mentors, whether that be an academic mentor, part of a volunteer group, whatever they're connected to. And they are constantly wanting to grow that work, to make it better, to sort of make a mark where they're at, to leave behind a little bit of a legacy. And that will always drive the student work, not the assessment frame. I think if that was to flip, and that would be unfortunate if it did, but if that was to flip, the passion would go out of the work. And when you hear our young people speak about their experiences, it's always about their work and what they're doing and how they're making a difference to where they're at. So I think that's really important, and that is another point of difference with Big Picture. For me, my personal the way I like to look at the students' work is at the end of each term we have exhibitions where the students come and they present their work. It normally lasts an hour, sometimes a little over, and they show everything, and they talk so passionately about what they've done and who they've been involved with, and you know, they have work on the table, they have little videos that they might like to share, a PowerPoint presentation, and you get a really solid view of that young person and their commitment to their learning, and also they understand how they learn as well. You know, they really have a deep understanding of their capacity. And then from there, I will sit down with the assessment frames, thinking just, you know, about that young person and what they've shown me on that day, and I will sort of fill in where I think they're sitting on the assessment frames. And not long after that, a day or two, I'll invite that young person to come and sit with me, and we'll have a discussion about it. And if they didn't show an element of learning, that is when I'll ask them, do you have anything in that area? Did you not bring it to the table? Did you not, you know, think about that? You know, just sort of question why it wasn't there. And they might not have done that type of work, and that's fine as well. But often they'll say, oh, you know, in my project, I could expand it by speaking to such and such, or creating such and such, or, you know, helping out here, or doing this and doing that. And it grows, the work grows. It is not the assessment leading the work, it is the project that leads the work. So I'll stop there, but that's just one thing I wanted to share. And from my experience as an advisor working with these young people, it's crucial that their passion is at the forefront of this work. Savannah, would you like to say something? Sorry, Tanya.
Savannah, I'm just going to jump in there, and then we'll come back to you, because I just wanted to add in, you know, Jacqui really described there the process, but also the idea that this work, the assessment frames, actually were driven by work that we were seeing already happen in the school, and the assessment frames were developed by advisory teachers with the support of the University of Melbourne, who have subsequently been working with us to psychometrically assess the frames. But the work of building the frames came out of that work that advisory teachers were doing, what they were seeing their young people do, and so this has been a very learning-driven and pedagogy-driven assessment regime from the beginning. But what we are finding in that beautiful loop of pedagogy and learning driving assessment, driving pedagogy and learning, is that through the process of moderation or calibration, as it's usually described in the US, it means that advisors are starting to have conversations with each other about the students and about their work. And so we're seeing a shift to having a shared language to have those really strong conversations with colleagues about pedagogy and about assessment, and to support a deep understanding of our young people and their learning. So thank you for that, Jacqui. And Savannah, it'd be lovely to hear from you now about your experience with the IBPLC.
Well, my experience with the IBPLC is not really an awful lot, because that's obviously not the main focus of what I do with my work. So with my work, I have a social action project, an LTI project, and then obviously the autobiography and the other work as well that comes along with it. So for my social action project this year, I worked with the Landcare volunteer team at Morisset Lighthouse as part of my LTI of getting out of the classroom and working with people who have similar interests to me. And there was a lot of work around bush restoration and land management and conservation, which is one of my passions. And as part of my social action project, I introduced an app to the Landcare team, which my academic mentor, who is Aaron Turak, who is a what is he? Principal scientist for the Department of Primary Industries. And he created an app in South Africa called Cyber Tracker, and it's basically a handheld, like an
an app you can get on your mobile phone. So it's a handheld sort of app where you can monitor biodiversity through taking photographs or sound recordings of wildlife, of flora and fauna. And so I introduced that app to the land care team and tried to promote a bit of citizen science in my local community. So by introducing the app, I kind of ran a workshop once or twice a week with the land care team, showing them how to use the app. So that was part of my social action project. And with my work, I've also been studying bioacoustics, which is the study of animal sounds within a particular location. And so with the work that I've been doing and presenting it at the end of the year, obviously as what Mum or my advisor was saying, I'm not focusing on the credentials at all. It's all about what I'm doing in front of me. And then I come to the exhibition presenting all of that work. And then at the end, maybe like what Mum was saying, a few days later, we'll go back through and see what elements I was missing from the work and what I can add for next time. But there's no real following each of the credentials like A, B's and C's of the work. So,
Great, thank you. Sorry, Jacqui.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We'll leave it at that.
All right. Might keep the thought. It might come out in questions, or there'll be another opportunity, I'm sure, for you to share. So Andrea Purcell, who's leading out on the work in the US. Is there anything that you would like to share about what's happening in the US? I see you've done a great job of helping us out in the chat there, responding to some people's questions. But
yeah, sure. So I think I appreciate all of the folks who've spoken before me, because it really paints the history of how the IBPLC has been developed. And so I can talk about our current work about bringing the IBPLC and making it a viable assessment option in a US context. Of course, we know that assessment and evaluation systems are really high stakes in the United States, and they're critically important to sort of what eventually comes up as the student experience. So what we appreciate about the IBPLC is that it really reflects the complexity and the depth of learning and experience that we value and that we've seen over the past 30 years in the US in our big picture network schools. So you will have heard about some of the practice, which is what this really is coming from, that needs to be in place in order for students to be able to present evidence for the IBPLC. So you've heard about things like the student deep investigation of their own interests, things that are being driven by what they're passionate about. You've heard about opportunities for students to practice their interests and to gain skills in authentic contexts. And so in the US, that might sound like an apprenticeship or an internship. Those are the kinds of experiences that would support that kind of learning. And you've also heard about the value that's placed on relationships. We approach this work from an equity standpoint and know that the purposeful facilitation of building social capital for students all over the place is a really critical part of the work that we do. So these kinds of practice frames are the things that need to be in place in order for the IBPLC. And we know that assessment is a bidirectional function. There's the practice that comes, and then that results in the evidence being presented and evaluated on the assessment. But what the outcomes are for students, what the expected assessment practice is, also influences the kind of activities that happen in the school system. Because as educators, we want our students to be successful. We want them to have post-secondary options, and we want them to be able to perform on those. So the assessment systems that we set up are really, like I said, critically important at the beginning of my comments here. In the US, we're just a few years behind the Big Picture Australia folks in terms of the rollout. So we're currently in year 2 of a pilot. So we have a small cohort of students and advisors who were trained and are being evaluated using the IBPLC from the last school year. The way that IBPLC is issued is that there's 3 moderation periods. So one currently is at the end of US equivalent grade 11, and 2 other moderations happen mid-year in US equivalent grade 12 and at the end of grade 12. So our first cohort students have gone through 1 moderation at the end of their grade 11 period, and they'll be issued a full credential this year after 2 more moderation periods. So we'll have our first cohort of students who are approaching universities and employers post-secondary using the credential as a point of evidence and as a transcript to present their capacity and their capabilities. We have included this year, for this school year, a larger cohort of students and advisors who are being trained and using the IBPLC, who will be going through their first moderation. So we expect by the end of the 23-24 school year that we'll have a fairly significant cohort of students who have been issued a full IBPLC credential and are using that to access their post-secondary options. We're working in lots of different ways in the US right now because this is a comprehensive approach and system. So we are inviting partnerships for any folks who are here who are interested in, if you're a school-based practitioner and you want to talk about practice and sort of how the IBPLC can be considered against your current practice. We have a series of ongoing workshops that are doing that, and I'll post some of these registrations and links in just a minute after I get finished speaking. We are speaking currently to and inviting university partners for 2 reasons. One, because we're really interested in replicating the University of Melbourne psychometric evaluation system and warranting from a US university perspective. So we're inviting university partners who would like to join us in that effort, and also inviting folks from universities who are on admissions teams who are interested in looking at the kind of information that's presented on an IBPLC transcript and seeing how that matches against the kinds of criteria that they have for admissions to their universities. As Gaby mentioned a minute ago, we have had a student, an international student, accepted to a US university, and we know that we can go institution by institution, or we can go system-wide if there's state systems or big systems that want to think about this more comprehensively. We know that there's vehicles and avenues for alternative presentations of transcripts already. And so we know that there's pieces in place for that. And we're also really interested in speaking to folks who impact policy around graduation requirements, because the credential and the criteria presents different. They present graduation requirements that we know lead to long-term productive outcomes for students. We've been doing this work. Like I said, the credential is just a reflection of this. The work that we've been doing has been 30 years, and we have evidence from all of that work and our graduates from around the world about how that impacts their life after they finish high school. But we're interested in speaking to folks who are in positions of making policy to make this credential and the kind of learning that it represents more accessible to greater numbers of students across the states in the United States. So that's sort of an abbreviated version of what we're doing in the US. I'm happy to field any questions, and I'll also put my email. I know that this is largely a US audience, and so I'll put my email in the chat box, and if anybody wants to connect more one-on-one about your specific interests or circumstances, you're absolutely welcome to contact me, and we can have more robust conversations later.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to respond. Andrea's been doing a great job of responding to questions in the chat, but I just wanted to cover off on a couple of quick ones, and then people can either jump in with questions or keep putting questions in the chat. So there's a question about the digital transcript being accepted by universities and colleges worldwide. Certainly we have universities and colleges across the world who are accepting it. We're not at a situation yet where it's been a universal acceptance. So you would have heard Gaby talking about the process that she followed, which was very much one university at a time. So identifying universities that students want to go to and then having a conversation with them. But we are certainly working on building the profile of the IBPLC, and something that we have noticed certainly in the Australian instance is we've been brokering those relationships with universities for a few years now, and even prior to the IBPLC. but we are getting some real momentum now, and it is starting to be recognised without us having to kind of go in and do the explaining piece. Also a question in there about the blockchain in terms of the platform that students are using for their online portfolio. At the moment, we don't specify, so students, that's part of the student agency. Some students code their own website, others use a variety of kind of plug and play website builders, but we are always looking at ways that we can build on that practice. And I'm very quickly, there was a question in there about sharing the assessment frames. I'm not going to share one in the chat, but I will just quickly do a quick screen share so that you can have a look at, this is the empirical reasoning frame. So you'll see that down the bottom here, we have capabilities. So the capabilities: explore, investigates, evaluates. Each capability is broken down into a series of indicators. And then at each level, there's a description of what the student can say, make, do, or value. And a significant point of difference, I guess, in terms of we're really clear that this is not a rubric, this is an assessment frame, because each movement from one quality criteria to the next really represents cognitive shift and a change in the way that the young person understands or behaves. And then over here we have the progression levels. So judgments are made at indicator level. We do that for multiple pieces of evidence. Then once that's been done, advisors make an on-balance judgment over here at the progression level, which has a richer statement describing the kinds of behaviours and knowledge that a student would exhibit at that level. So Andrea has just dropped in the chat some of those, the link to the next general information session that's happening in November about the IBPLC. We've also had the opportunity to share the slides again. I've got the check-in sheet, so I know there's some questions on there, but I think just to kind of round out, I wanted to talk about one of the things that was in there was about equity and how do we work with young people where there might be language barriers. So in Western Australia, we work with a school in the Nanandara lands. So there's 8 schools in that group, and those schools are up to 4 hours apart. It's there's a lot of Aboriginal and First Nations students and families who are enrolled in those schools, some of whom have English as even a second or third language. So we're able to recognise both on-country and off-country learning that takes place in those schools, and we really do that through leveraging the relationship that we have with mentors. We don't have an expectation that all of the expert knowledge would sit within the school. We really look for people that we can partner with outside of the school to make sure that our students have the best access to folks who can help them learn in a rigorous, authentic and meaningful way. And you heard both Savannah and Brandon talk about their relationships with their mentors and how that had helped them strengthen the work that they've been doing. Stella students definitely change their minds along the way. I'm going to flick that question to Brandon, but while we're doing that, we are also going to drop a feedback link into the chat, and it would be great if people could fill that out. So Brandon, you want to tell us about changing your mind?
Yeah, so I think I'd be probably hyper specialized in answering a question about changing your mind when it comes to what you wanted to do at the end of the big picture schooling. I changed a few times, typically during the later years as well. So a lot of people, when they're in big picture, do a lot of different projects when they first start off. So when I joined, I was in year 8. So a lot of people switched projects a lot and did a bunch of different topics just to explore their passions and figure out what they wanted to do in their later years. Whereas I was very on topic, which I was studying biomedical science and I was very biology driven. So I was very on topic with that for, I'd say, about 3-4 years of big picture, where all of my projects were about science. I went out and I'd had a lot of different professional LTI experiences with different organizations, had a lot of different mentors, and I was on track to, and my passion was to go to university and do a Bachelor of Biomedical Science. In the latter years, a bunch of different life experiences outside of school and a lot of things that occurred inside of school led me to have a bit of a passion change. I decided that maybe university study wasn't the best idea for me at the time, and that I didn't want to go into that scientific field as deeply anymore. So and due to the fact that I'd recently started volunteering for the New South Wales RFS, and that had taken over a lot of my outside of school life, I switched and integrated that into a lot of my schoolwork. So that's where I then switched into my passion is now investigating this front of things and going into I then picked psychology of New South Wales RFS volunteers, my final project. But that just shows how drastic a passion change can be during the middle of a year or coming up to the end of my schooling even, how drastic I can feel like I need to have a passion change. Have a look at that, explore that, the environment of the advisory and having the close relationship with the advisor allows me to do that. I'm not penalised at all. There's no loss from feeling like I need to change passion. I had the ability to just create and plan new work closely with Jacqui and the mentors that I had. We planned new projects and more advanced work that I could do. And then I continued to explore that well into until I graduated. And then, of course, that's still always been the end goal after graduating, but I've went through a bunch of different options and pathways now that I've left school, all that have been big pictures really helped because, of course, I've learned how to learn different things a lot more. It's not just learning content in big picture, it's knowing how to learn things. So learning that process has really assisted me in creating different pathways for myself, leaving school to be able to reach the end goal that I still have.
Thanks, Brandon. And yes, you were the right guy to answer that question for us. So thank you. I'm just conscious of time. I certainly have a little bit of time to stay on if anybody has any specific questions that they really just would like to get answered today. But I really would encourage you to just go back through the chat there, have a look at the links, join in with Andrea's presentations that will be coming up in November. Certainly this was just designed to kind of give you an overview of a very rich process of assessing young people. We're really proud of this work. We're proud of the work of all of the advisory teachers and practitioners and our young people that have helped us to build and refine the IBPLC, and we look forward to doing that on an ongoing basis, including hopefully with some of you who are meeting for the first time today. Really, we're trying to put the person back in assessment, and instead of asking that age-old question of how good is this student, we'd like to ask the question, how is this student good? And we think that our assessment frames and the IBPLC and the richness of the digital transcript, which allows the Young People Agency to share who they are and to demonstrate the strong passion and interest and knowledge that they have through their online portfolio and video statement, is really groundbreaking, and we look forward to working with anybody who feels the same way. So feel free to sign off if you have somewhere else that you need to be. Otherwise, you can stay on for a minute if you have a particular question.